Welcome to MotoGP Mac. And in today's video, we're going to talk about the upcoming race this weekend in Assen. Now, before we get into it, here is the schedule for Friday. Here is the schedule for Saturday. And here is the schedule for Sunday. So for me, this weekend is a real big weekend for the top three. The Marquez brothers, can they stretch their lead? You know, realistically, if Mark does the double this weekend, it's definitely one hand on the trophy, in my view. However, I think Alex is going to start to try and get in front of him and see what happens. The only gripe that I have with Alex is that Alex doesn't race Mark in as hard as Mark races Alex. And, you know, if he wants to be world champion, then he got to start diving up the inside of his brother like he does to other riders. Pecco Bagnaia, look, it is a major weekend as well for Pecco. 110 points behind Mark. You know, as people have said, you know, the championship is over. Pecco has said himself, I can't even start to think about the title. But then, you know, it was at this race a couple of years ago where he was 92 points behind Fabio Quartararo, and something changed for him. You know, he became more consistent, won with the bike. So I'm still hesitant to write him off because of what he has done in the past. For all we know, something could click on that and all of a sudden it could be game on. Mark is not immune to the odd crashes here and there. So, you know, it is technically still possible. You know, there is 13 more races to go. So let's wait and see on that. But, you know, it is definitely looking more and more difficult for Pecco. Pecco also needs to watch out for Bam Bam Morbidelli, who realistically is 32 points behind him, and when you look at Fabio Di Giannantonio is only 40 points behind him, so Pecco can't really rest on his laurels. Be interesting to see for Zarco how the Honda will react this weekend as well. Clearly it didn't work last weekend. Marco Bezzecchi on the Aprilia should suit the Aprilia. There is fast flowing circuit, so it just depends on how smooth the circuit is to make the most out of the Aprilia Aero. Pedro Acosta, you know, does need a bit of a good weekend, you know, finishing up in 4th place or 5th place, I think, is where he really needs to get the boost. Aldecar, kind of similar. He does need a top 10. You know, he had a rough weekend in Mugello, if I'm very honest. Fabio Quartararo, how good will that shoulder be? You know, going around Assen is a very physical track as well. So let's see how he goes there. Maverick Vinales definitely will be looking for something out of this weekend after getting taken out by Morbidelli last weekend. Ayagora, who, as we know, is coming back from injury, you know, did a solid race in Mugello, but again, as he gets fitter and fitter, let's wait and see what happens with him. Brad Binder does need a big weekend, in my view. He really needs to pull something out of the bag. You know, he only has 50% of the points that Pedro Acosta, his teammate, has. So, yeah, you know, and we know while KTM do love him, we know how ruthless they can be when riders aren't performing. Raul Fernandez, you know, really solid race last week in Mugello. Yes, we do give him grief, but it's not unwarranted grief. Will be interesting to see how he can get that bike around Assen. Can he prove that he's on form? He is saying that from Jerez he did find something, but let's wait and see. Proof is in the pudding, as they say. Enea Bastianini hopefully will have a solid weekend this weekend. You know, did crash out of the main race on Sunday, so, you know, does need to come back a small bit better. Joan Mir, again, similar to Zarco, can the Honda work around Assen? Clearly didn't work last weekend, so can they get it going? Alex Rins, you know, again, really needs a good solid weekend. Yes, he got a good qualifying position, but fell back throughout both the sprint race and the main race, and like realistically does need to push on and get up there with Fabio, in my view. Jack Miller fighting for his MotoGP career. Terrible race for him on the Sunday, but saying that, you know, Jack is very good at resetting the clock and going again Taka Nakagami, I haven't heard is he replacing Luca Marini this weekend, but saying that it's impressive with the amount of races that Nakagami has done. He does have 10 points. Lorenzo Salvadori will no doubt be there instead of Jorge Martin. Again, look, nothing major, nothing bad either. Let's just see what he can bring out of that. Miguel Oliveira, another man who is going to be under pressure. Yes, he had a pretty good race weekend, but nothing to write home about. I do notice, right, yes, Miguel was injured for a couple of races this season, but saying that, Taka Nakagami's only done very few races, has 10 points, Miguel is on 6, so definitely Miguel does need to pull the finger out. He has 3 races to prove that he is Pramac's choice for the 2026 season. And Sam Kitchanchera, look, we know really what's going to happen with him. He is going to be last. And look, from what I saw when I saw him live, he's losing most of his time braking too early. So it will be interesting to see, can he start getting a little bit closer and closer to the pack. All in all, look, Assen is one of those racetracks. It's absolutely epic. The Cathedral of Speed, and it's given that name for a very, very good reason. All in all, though, I think Mark would be the fastest rider over the course of the race weekend. I would believe Alex may try and steal the limelight on Friday, so I'm going to go for him for fastest man on Friday. But I would definitely love to know your thoughts. What are you most looking forward to for the Grand Prix at Assen? And who was your fastest man on Friday? Definitely leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another video.